Let's hear now from economist and wealth manager Jonathan Davis to see what he makes of all of this hoo-ha. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello there.
Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Now, Cameron has been forced to make another statement, this time in the Commons, and Downing Street are now saying that any potential Prime Minister should publish their tax returns. This despite the fact that no one's really found anything wrong in David Cameron's tax returns, right?
And indeed, and that's the reason why he's made them all available.
Well, if he didn't make them available, then that would speak volumes in itself, wouldn't it?
Well, he's obviously been hounded by people like you or your colleagues, the press, and it's interesting because didn't recently they say GCHQ, MI6, HMRC, everyone needs to have access to everyone's personal details, but if you haven't done anything, there's nothing to worry about. Well, here's an example of he didn't do anything, and yet he's been forced to issue the details. Having said that, though, he and his PR advisors have totally messed up here because over the last week or 10 days that he was asked the questions, he kept getting the answers wrong, or he lied, we don't know, but eventually he was forced by his own incompetence to put out information, but I think it's an outrage that the information is out there. Where's it going to end? This to me is the first stage. You are quite right when you say, does that mean that we get his health records? What about his family? And so on. Where does it end? Does it go into the media, the editors? Should you, because you work in the media, should we get to know about your £500,000 a year salary? Or is it not 500,000? Prove it.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll stick something out. Maybe if I had a pay slip yet, as you know, this is a new station, so I haven't actually received them. When I get one, maybe I'll tweet it out. I'll see what the bosses say, what the ethics of that are. But what about the people who say, Jonathan, that, if he's going to go around David Cameron saying, in the light of Jimmy Carr's tax scandal a while back, oh, it is a bit immoral. It might not be illegal, but it is immoral for you to arrange your money in this way. If he said that, then really he's got to expect this level of scrutiny into his own affairs, hasn't he?
In that respect, that's a very fair point. When he made, and George Osborne made those comments, when was that? About 2 years ago, about Jimmy Carr and other celebrities and massively earning footballers, etc., who were doing entirely legal tax avoidance arrangements. For him to question the morality of celebrities, my goodness, totally outrageous. People who live in glass houses, etc. Yes, he shouldn't have made those comments. To suggest it's immoral to reduce your tax is essentially the same as questioning the qualities and the greatness of Winston Churchill, because the great man himself said, I'm Scottish, but even he said, it's the duty of every Englishman to pay as little tax as possible, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. In fact, one of my jobs day in, day out is to save people tax. I don't want people, my clients, to pay tax so that the state can then waste that money.
Well, there are those who might imagine that you are free, of course, and some people do this. I know of people who do this, who put in their gross earnings and don't claim a single expense back, right? And some people do that because they believe that the amount of money they pay into the state has a direct relationship with the quality of society that they and their children grow up in. And that,
well, good luck to them, but they're not.
You might not agree with that, but that's the point. Is we live in a free country, and it's their freedom of choice to think that. Just as I suppose it's freedom of you and your clients to think, actually, we don't trust the government, and we'd rather, presumably, you give a great deal to charity, of course, Jonathan.
That's none of your affair.
No, it's not, is it? But I'm just saying that's what a lot of people who like to limit their tax payments say, and of course that's what it is. I mean, what are the principles, to your mind, that our tax system are built upon? Because that is what's really being called into question here, and someone needs to have the guts, probably someone in a position of power like the Prime Minister or George Osborne, to get up and clarify to every member of the British public exactly what the point of tax is, and it's not a moral choice.
It's not a moral choice, it's a political construct. Since time immemorial, I've been saying in the media for the past couple of weeks, while this brouhaha has been brewing, pardon the mixed metaphor there, that since ancient Greece, the super rich have never paid tax. And that has been proven yet again with the Bahamas and the British Virgin Islands and so on. The super rich do not pay tax. The people who pay the tax are the workers, the middle class, and the rich earners. In other words, not the super rich who actually don't work. The poor don't pay tax because they don't earn, and the super rich don't pay tax. That's where the problem lies. And until we get a change of politics, it's never going to change. And that's what's exceedingly unfair about the system.
Well, how can that change, especially when we read all the time about big corporations being allowed to circumvent tax?
The multinationals should be paying a reasonable amount of tax based upon the profits they're making in the UK. It's an absolute outrage that they're allowed to make profits here, but say that it was based in Ireland or the Bahamas. It's absolute arrant nonsense. But we're talking we're talking less about companies. We're talking about private individuals here who have vast amounts of wealth, but they don't pay tax. Let me give you one example. Why is it that over the last 40 years, someone who had a £35,000 house in central London finds that they've made £1 million tax-free gains on that house? That is an outrage as far as I'm concerned. So there is one example where wealthy people are not paying tax. And then you have super wealthy footballers, super wealthy landowners who don't pay tax because they are allowed to treat their income or their gains outside of the UK. Winston Churchill again, I don't normally bring this guy up, but I'm bringing him up a second time.
Yeah.
He tried to bring in a land value tax that, of course, is practically never discussed in the UK media. And what it would mean is that if you own land or buildings, you pay tax. I'm telling you, that is the fairest form of tax that there is, because you cannot hide a property. Therefore, you get taxed on it. Hong Kong has got it, and you know what? Their income tax is 15%. They've still got full Social Security, and they've got a land value tax, and they have a higher standard of living than we do.
Well, just as an aside, you mentioned Churchill twice, which is quite apt, because at 5:30, listeners, we will be speaking to David Lough, who is a historian and the author of a Churchill biography. And in it, you're quite right, Jonathan, it says that Winston Churchill was a serial tax avoider who exploited loopholes and faked his own retirement in collusion with the chairman of the Inland Revenue.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating stuff. Tune in at 5:30 and you'll hear more from the biographer who claims to have exposed all this. So quite appropriate that you brought him up. Where do you think this sort of moral outrage from the great British public? Because if I'm understanding you possibly, Jonathan, you are saying that it's us, the ordinary dopes in the street, right, who are the ones who are overpaying tax. David Cameron, who, you know, although he's from a background of wealth, he is not what could be probably described as a high earner at this moment in time. So he in some ways, I suppose, is one of us. And yet what's happening is we're all being encouraged to point the finger at each other over how much tax we are or aren't paying. And meanwhile, the people who are really getting away with it, they're sort of elsewhere, just laughing on their beds made of cash, aren't they?
I agree with most of what you said there, and yes, the super rich are laughing their heads off. There's no question. But no, I wouldn't agree with you that the likes of David Cameron is one of us.
Well, no, of course that's absurd, but he's getting paid 200 grand a year at the moment, right? Which, as much as that's a lovely chunk of change, it doesn't put him in Roman Abramovich levels, does it?
No, indeed, but I wasn't going to talk about his earnings, and it's interesting because you talk about high earners. I talk about super rich. The super rich are not earning, they make capital gains. And David Cameron and Samantha Cameron, they've got the family home that he and his family paid peanuts for. It's gone up by, what, £2 million tax-free, and they get £90,000 a year. Okay, they pay tax on it, but £90,000 a year income. I tell you what, you and I couldn't get a property that pays us an income of £90,000 a year. So we should actually be looking at ordinary type folk. We should be looking at house prices. We should be looking at the tax-free gains on house prices. That's the reason why the politicians support high house prices, because, of course, they're all house owners, and many of them, 1/3 of them, are property investors.
Jonathan, thanks ever so much for joining us on Talk Radio.
Most welcome, anytime.
Good stuff. That's Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager.